Thank you for joining us this morning for the Bainbridge Island. There's something to talk about, and it is my pleasure this morning for introducing you again for the second time, David Harrison, who is our neighbor and the senior lecturer emeritus at the Evans School of Public Policy and Governance at University of Washington. Good morning, David. Thanks for joining us.
I enjoyed it last time, and hopefully we'll have a good time again. A lot has happened. So it turns out I'm a Zoom veteran, but not so much this Google utility. And it turns out I can only see half of you. So when we get into questions, hopefully Karen will help make sure that I hear or see a hand or whatever. And we'll get into a discussion mode. 10 or so of us talked on November 13th and went over some thoughts about what had happened in the election. And subsequently, Reed has sent me some notes on some things we might want to talk about. And I'll make sure that I don't talk so long that it precludes spirited discussion by all of us. So I'm going to say some things about Trump's ongoing concession, having lost the election. I'm going to say a little bit about voter suppression, and then Reed asked me to talk about the COVID stimulus package and continuing resolution, and then we will definitely get to Georgia and what's happening in Georgia. It's a big deal, and so those three things will take 15 minutes or so, and then we'll let it fly as we did last time and say wise and witty things to each other, as is our custom. So I've been in and around political things for almost 70 years, and this is definitely a strange time for 100 U.S. congressmen to join the Texas lawsuit. Is a sign of how much work we have to do, because there's 98 of them would know that there's no merit in the Texas lawsuit before the Supreme Court. And what is happening, of course, among those Republican congressmen is they don't want to risk the wrath of Donald Trump. They're not making it up. He does have the capacity, when members of the House of Representatives run for re-election 2 years from now, he does have the capacity to spur a primary challenge against them. So they're not wrong to be worried about it. Where they're wrong is that they've forgotten their oath of office. So that's a minor exclusion on their part. I do want to say that for those of you who supported the Biden-Harris ticket, if you're grumpy about Trump's failure to concede and his loss by count of 50 or so lawsuits and his continued fairly bizarre efforts, just think how upset you'd be if you had lost on November 3rd. This is nothing in terms of denial and despair compared to how you would feel if we had to, for those of you who are on that side, which I am, how you would feel if we had 4 more years of this unusual behavior. My own view, of course, he never really had thought about the actual mechanics of being president, and he's still kind of short. I think 80 million to 73 million shows what a mammoth election it was, and those of us who are activists, including several people on this screen, we needed every bit of the activism we had to get to those 80 million votes and to win in the most contested states. So I think it's a tribute to the organizing that started on November, whatever it was, 5th, 7th, 2016, and it took all of that. I'm not with the idea that we should be, those of us who are on that side, should be relentlessly despairing about 73 million people voting the other way. There's a lot of reasons why people, there's a lot of illegitimate reasons why people would vote for Donald Trump, including whatever has been said in the last 4 years on his almost fully owned TV channel, Fox, by Fox commentators who are tremendously influential. There's a lot of illegitimate reasons, but if you're, for instance, anti-choice on abortion, or if you are very worried about family wage jobs for high school graduates, which we haven't had in very strong supply these last few years, you could formulate an argument that Trump is saying something to you. He's faking it. He doesn't care about any of those things, but I'm just saying we should be about the task if we're on the other side of thinking about the various reasons that people didn't vote with us, rather than saying all 73 million of them are crazy or whatever is being said out there in the social media universe. With regard to the three issues that Reed asked me to emphasize, first, in the last ditch effort by Trump to reverse the results of the election only has two elements, as you know. One is the petition by Texas before the Supreme Court. We could talk about it some more. I think those of you who read up on this do see that the analysts are saying that it does not have merit. States don't have clear standing to challenge the constitutionally mandated rights of other states to set up election systems. So it will be interesting. My own guess is that the court's not going to hear this case, just like they didn't hear the last appeal. So we'll see. Either way, the Supreme Court is not going to disallow the election of Biden in 5 states. It's not going to happen. And on January 6th, when the Congress meets ceremonially to receive the vote of the electors, which happens on December 14th, they're not going to overturn the vote of the electors either in the House or in the Senate. And there'll be plenty of Republican senators between now and then who will indicate that it's over and that there's no chance that there would be some kind of successful attempt by Trump in January 6th to reverse the results of the election. I just want to flag, and those of you who follow my blog, which you can get by emailing me at dsh347@gmail.com. My blog is now called Our Unfinished Work, and the most recent issue that came out on Wednesday is what's going to happen these next 2 or even 4 years on voter suppression. Remember that the net result of Trump pretending that he lost is 40 million or so, maybe 50 million Republican and independent voters believing a lot of that stuff. And that will affect state legislatures for the next 2 or 4 years. And there'll be battles over various elements of how people register to vote, whether they can get mail-in ballots, and what signature proof there needs to be, and whether there'll be early voting and when the votes will be counted. All those things that we've talked about for the last month will be before state legislatures. And as you know, for those of us on that side, we didn't win those down ballot races. So they're pretty much the same state legislatures that we've had before. So that means certainly in Georgia and Arizona and in Pennsylvania, huge battles between Republicans and Democrats and Republicans over whether those states' voting systems should be changed. The other thing to note, for those, since we're all Washingtonians, is 2 days ago, in response to Lauren Culp's allegation of fraud in Washington, Kim Wyman, who's our Republican Secretary of State, issued a very long and detailed statement on how we count votes in Washington, including a response to Culp's thinking that 100,000 deceased people voted, and Kim Wyman writes about how that's prevented. So if you care about these things, that is a good thing to look at. So in addition to state legislatures, I would remind us all that there are litigators. In fact, the Georgia count is related in part to litigation that Stacey Abrams had a year ago in terms of the processes for verifying voter signatures. And in that consent order that Republicans agreed to, including the Secretary of State, there was a system for telling people if their signature was being rejected, because before that, African-American signatures were being rejected at twice the rate as whites. So there's litigation, and I would call your attention, for those who don't follow it, to the Brennan Center at NYU, which is the ultimate litigator and evaluator of legal issues having to do with voter suppression. You can get a free brief from them. Just click in, set up, and you don't have to ever give them a cent from that pile that's underneath your pillow. So that's a good thing. I'm going to quickly run through some things about stimulus. We'll talk about Georgia, and then we'll take insights and thoughts and insults. What's going on in Congress right now, don't believe what you hear. They're not going to go home without passing a stimulus bill. They're just not. There's all sorts of things look dark. That's part of the kabuki theater that's going on between Nancy Pelosi and Mitch McConnell. The White House is pretty much a bit player in it, although Mnuchin gets involved. And the primary battle has to do with two things. In the huge stimulus that we passed last summer, which was $1.4 trillion, who's counting? There was no money for state and local governments. And as you know, state and local governments have to balance their budget on a yearly or biannual basis. So they can't run up the deficit the feds are running. So they get in a situation when the tax revenues plummet that they have to cut services at the time that citizens most need those services. So that's why they want money. And there is $160 billion in there that's agreed to for state and local governments. But Mitch wants something for that. And it has to do with protection against liability for companies on COVID-related issues. And so that's the showdown. And the big news of all of this, and what I see as good news, is the whole reason we're this far along is a coalition of Democratic and Republican senators in the center. So on things like this, Susan Collins and Joe Manchin and others are essential. And the reason I like it is because it bodes well for Biden, even if he doesn't get the 2 Senate seats that he hopes to get in Georgia. You'll see more of that sort of center get more than 50 votes action than McConnell ever did with Obama. Part of that is also that Joe Biden goes back with these senators forever. I was in Washington, worked in Washington from 79 to 86. Joe Biden was serving by the time I left, and so was Grassley. So it makes it possible that certain things will happen, even if perish the thought the Democrats are stuck at 48. So that means certainly a repair of Obamacare and maybe some expansion. And it certainly means some action on climate change, but we're not going to have the kind of dramatic action that some people hope for. Certainly nothing close to Medicare for all and the Green New Deal. Just to remind you before we move on to Georgia, that the Senate races 2 years from now are favorable. 22 Republicans are up for re-election and 12 Democrats. And Grassley's retiring. The Wisconsin seat will be up. Pat Toomey of Pennsylvania, the Republican, is retiring. So we have more seats in play than that we could win than they do, and it makes it possible if we don't get to 50 now, or if we get to 50, to get a couple, three more seats next time around. That, however, is not what usually happens in the off-year election. So we'd have to do well in the next 2 years. So let me talk a little bit about Georgia, and then let's go to thoughts, concerns, insights, and insults. On Georgia, Jim and maybe some of the rest of you and I were on with David Domke the other night, who's an analyst of these races, and he was pointing out, and I think quite correctly, that we have a natural disadvantage in Georgia that we overcame in November, and that we won't necessarily overcome right now. The disadvantage is it's not really a purple state yet, and the reason why we won by 10,000 votes is people like Stacey Abrams did monumental organizing, which we all supported. But John Ossoff, who's running against David Perdue, trailed Biden by almost 100,000 votes. That is, 100,000 people voted for Biden and David Perdue. So that shows you that we have a little bit of a problem. And it's also the case that in runoff elections that Democrats are more likely to not stay for a runoff than Republicans. However, we have going for us that we have monumental citizen organizing in Georgia. I've been supporting, for instance, an organization that thinks about the 200,000 or so Latino voters in the Atlanta area. We have monumental organizing, including Stacey Abrams, Fair Fight, and the New Georgia Project, which is focused on African-American voting. And we have Republicans fighting Republicans. So, as you know, Senators Loeffler and Perdue have been saying snotty things about Governor Kemp and Secretary of State Raffensperger. So that's good stuff. If that disheartens Republicans, if they decide to stay away because they think the previous election was rigged, then they can stay away and we'll vote instead, and we'll be happy to do it that way. So my prediction is that we have a shot, I think maybe a 40% shot of winning. For those of you who are giving money, I would go with organizing organizations. The New Georgia Project is doorbelling right now, so you can give money to them. When you give money to Fair Fight, Stacey Abrams splits it with Warnock, Loeffler, Warnock, Ossoff, and herself, her organization. So there's a lot of good choices. So let me stop so that you won't be afraid that I'm going to talk the entire hour that we have. And what questions, thoughts, concerns, insights do we have?
I just wanted to mention that there's some groups here locally that you can write letters to, or write postcards also. It's called
that's
Indivisible. Yeah.
Indivisible. A couple times in my previous blogs, I've given 3 or 4 postcard links. Most recently in the blog this week, I linked to the site of Common Power, which does postcards and text and phone calls. So what you want to do in that case is, if you're still going to do it and you haven't done it, is link with somebody you're comfortable. There's a quality difference between the best and the worst. You want somebody giving you those names carefully and giving you some ideas of what to say and do. But other than that, it's nothing but a good thing.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what Indivisible does. They give you a script, they give you the address. You have to contact them through an email to get the addresses. They don't just put them out publicly. So it's done very well. So
yeah, I think Indivisible is a good bet.
Yeah.
Sure. And as some of you know, Bill, for the one Indivisible cell, Bill McLean does a great regular set of postings on these matters.
Yeah. Just a shout out. Anybody have a question? Raise your hand or. Oh, by the way, that's not David's blog. I gave the wrong blog. So don't look. The blog I put up is incorrect. Do not use that blog. That's for a children's blog.
My name is called Our Unfinished Work, and you could Google that and David Harrison and it will come up. But you could also email me and I'll add you to the e-blast that we do. So every other week we send this out to 2,000 followers, which is very heartening. And you can get it by emailing me at dsh347@gmail.com. It includes each week, every other week, some thinking about where we stand, and then 3 specific things that you can do. And I've had people do those 3 things for 102 issues now.
Thank you, Reed. Yeah, Reed put up your address. He types much faster than I do. Yeah, so
he's a tech for sure.
So anyhow, okay. Any questions?
That's it. We're done already.
I know we can go now or whatever, or we're already home. Right. No,
I have a question. I'm wondering if there's been some basic split, it seems, between the Republicans who are in office and the Republicans who are no longer in office. Do you have any idea how this might fall off after Trump becomes at least somewhat less dangerous as a candidate for 2024?
So, couple of thoughts on that. First, veteran activist myself, I'd love to have Trump announced for 2024. I think, as we all know, 77 is not so old, but he'll be 77. He may well be a felon by then, but he certainly will have done another 4 years of tweeted lies. And I think the little secret that isn't so little in DC is most of the Senate does not respect him. They fear him, and for good reason. The story, of course, 2 years ago was how he undid Mark Sanford of South Carolina. So people say, well, why don't these Republicans just battle for the center and distance themselves from Trump? And that's because that's political suicide. If you're going to get in a congressional race 100,000 votes or so, you don't want to start out by telling 30, 40,000 of those folks to go away. So Trump does have that amount of political support, and the reason why that's plays out in who that'll stop ringing in a minute. The reason why it matters is you see formerly elected Republicans speaking out only when they don't plan to run for anything again. And so what's going to join? So everybody, Chris Christie's a great example, and he'll talk again because he can. The reason why you don't get people who are still wanting to run for office is it's politically suicidal. You see, even Susan Collins, who cannot abide Donald Trump, watches her flank. So what is going to happen is Susan Collins and Romney and Lisa Murkowski are hoping to get some cover by playing with Joe Manchin, and they're hoping for 10 or so issues over the next 2 years to play in the center. In terms of who's going to publicly tell Trump it's over, where there is hope is sitting U.S. senators who are not up for a long time. So yesterday, John Cornyn of Texas said he didn't understand what possible legal theory that the Texas Attorney General was using in the Supreme Court. That's an example. He just got reelected. He's got 6 years. So he's banking that no Trumpite is going to kneecap him 6 years from now. Anybody who is up 2 years from now isn't going to do that. So another great hope is Charles Grassley, who's in his 80s, who was the inventor of strong inspectors general in the cabinet agencies, and therefore who have been killed by Trump. So there's some hope that Grassley, who's not running again, will duly note that the election is over.
So these senators and representatives, they're worried about their own political ambitions.
There's a lot of Democrats who don't see how a human could do this because they took oath of office and so forth. How could you support Trump during the day and gnash your teeth in the evening? You tell yourself this story. I worked in DC for 8 years. I know this story. You tell yourself that the world will be a better place if you stay than if you leave. You tell yourself that you'll be useless if you leave, so that you will abide a certain amount of baloney, because the world is a better place for you to be if you have been reelected. So that's what you tell yourself, and we all make compromises. This is just a pretty monumental set of compromises for them to buy in. We're now almost 6 weeks after the election, so this is pretty awful. And don't make a mistake. I mean, it diminishes America, so that's not a good thing either. You don't want America to be diminished by all this stuff.
You're a very popular man there, David. They're calling you.
I just unplugged it.
So, I was going to make a point, but I forgot. A senior moment. Oh well.
We've got a texted a question about the Lincoln Project.
Yes.
There's a lot of Democrats that the reason why they don't like the Lincoln Project is these are the operatives that Swift voted. Well, not necessarily the specific one. These are the kinds of operatives that have used that same skill in designing advertisements to take down John Kerry and Al Gore. So people remember that.
Mhm.
But I think what they did during the election was useful. I'm not against it. I'm not for, putting them to, giving them the Presidential Medal of Freedom or something. But I'm glad they were there. I'm glad they're there in Georgia. If they can put something out there that mainstream Republicans like, and even like more than they would if we put it out there, then I'm happy to have it. I wouldn't, give George Conway a cabinet seat or anything.
Oh dear, no. Oh, Bonnie, do you have a question?
Well, you made an allusion to Trump's being a felon. What do you think the chances of that are? What area is it going to happen? When's it going to happen? What about the rest of his family? What about it?
Well, I think it's more likely to happen in having to do with tax law and charitable giving law and other chicanery in New York State. So I think what Michael Cohen was saying is that Trump systematically overvalued his assets when he was using them as collateral and undervalued the exact same assets when he was paying taxes. So that's, again, depending on how you did that and what you swore to, that would be against the law. The issue also would be in terms of federal law would be tax fraud on your federal income taxes on things like claimed business expenses, including his legendary hair. But I think it's more likely to be ongoing state prosecution, and it's certainly possible that he'll plead to something to stay out of prison. I'm not that enthusiastic. I mean, I'd be fine with it, but I'm not for it claiming the narrative over the next 2 years. I want the narrative to be claimed just the way Biden is doing it, taking over on the virus, trying to bring America together, restoring our global leadership. To me, that's all music. Sheila, did you have a question?
I do, David. This is a different segue. It's just something different. This has to do with Biden's cabinet.
Yes.
First of all, my question is, what do you think of his announcements so far? And what do you think? Second of all, do you think they'll pass all of them through the Senate? And third, what's going to happen with Pete Buttigieg? Where's my man?
They're talking about Mayor Pete as ambassador to China. That's been the latest gossip. That would be interesting. We'll get the Chinese more interested in LGBTQ issues.
Well, not only that, but he speaks Mandarin, so he would.
I didn't know that.
Oh yeah! Oh my
I think
God!
it's
Yes.
a good place for him. And if we're on the receiving end, so if we've heard about it, there's going to be something to it. The most interesting appointment is Susan Rice as head of the domestic policy staff. She's a very bright woman, and he doesn't need her to be confirmed for that. So that's a good thing for, that's one reason why he put her over there, because she would have had a confirmation battle for being Secretary of State. The big battle now, first, I would say all this back and forthing from various groups saying progressives or Latinos, African Americans about the mix. This is a monumentally diverse cabinet and senior staff, and I would just wait till he's done to draw these conclusions. The big battle right now, of course, is over General Austin, because when Jim Mattis got named Secretary of Defense, the Democrats were very bitter about giving the waiver that was necessary for a uniformed officer to take civilian posts within 7 years of having been an officer. But they'll figure out a way to do it. They're not going to turn down General Austin, so he'll be Secretary of Defense. I don't know that much about this woman who was head of Center for American Progress and who they want to have be OMB. I've read that she's still going to be fine, but I don't know one way or another. I do think it's time for our side to let Joe Biden be president for a couple of weeks before we do these internecine battles.
I agree. Yeah.
On the other hand, expecting that of this party is, I think, it's a big tent. We can use everybody in the tent, and if AOC's standard for being in the tent is that she gets to tweet on a daily basis, then tweet away.
Yeah, true. Hey, Reed, do you have a question?
Yeah, well, just what you're talking about now, there's been a lot of political commentary written about how the Democratic center and left could only hold themselves together tenuously against Trump, and that now they're going to, as you said, internecine battles. They're going to be very less effective when they try to govern. Are there the elements to hold this coalition together for the next couple of years and let Biden be president, as you put it?
I think there are. I think they lost 10 or so seats in the House, and that makes the Derek Kilmer style Democrats a little bit more wary of the broader progressive agenda, and Nancy has fewer votes to deal with. So I think it moves us back toward the center a tad. Joe Biden will do a lot of things by executive order that will understandably please Bernie and others. He'll do a lot of climate change and environmental stuff by executive order, as Trump did. So there's a way to meet those political interests. I think Bernie can count too, and I think is 4 years ago they didn't close ranks because they didn't think they had to. I think Bernie spent all summer negotiating with Hillary because he thought it was a slam dunk against Trump, and not only did he disabuse himself of that notion this time, he's also goes way, way, way back with Joe Biden. So I do not predict that the party will split. I predict that each thing will be its own battle, and that Biden knows how to be buffeted from all sides, and that the new power in Washington, besides Joe Biden, is Joe Manchin. I think at 48 or 50, he and Susan Collins and others are going to get you whatever the best thing one can get out of the Senate will be. Oh, somebody asked why the Lincoln Project seemed like they did better than Democrats. I think because they had a different brief. If you're a Democrat putting together an ad, you're thinking about persuasion and independence, and you're a little worried about being a little too snarky. So I think they decided to leave snarky to the Lincoln Project, and that was intentional. I mean, there's people who know how to make ads. Of course, we didn't see on the Democratic Party. We didn't see a lot of them because we weren't a contested state. The contested states, I mean, the Democratic small donors fueled an immense amount of campaign spending, and which, of course, not only allowed us to take back Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan, but allowed us to preserve Nevada and win Arizona and Georgia. So it's not like it didn't work.
Yeah. Yeah. George Conway certainly is snarky. I'll agree with you on that one.
Well, I mean, there's this big argument from when Michelle said, when they go low, we go high. We never went quite as high as she was describing, but certainly higher than the other side. I would say this about that. I think the amount of time spent on clever Facebook parody songs should have a limit. I'm much more interested in how we can support New Georgia Project and how we can stay relentless and how we can chip away at 73 million people who voted against us.
Yeah.
Sheila?
Oh, Sheila has a question. Sheila, you want to unmute yourself?
Yeah, all right, there. Sometimes, sometime I'll learn, maybe. That I have a really, really fine friend who has come up through the ranks in the Democratic Party. He's young, he's 29, 30 maybe. And he in the Wisconsin Democratic Party. And he is presently a city clerk, or county clerk rather, over by Milwaukee area. It's not Milwaukee, but it's over in that area. Anyway, so I wrote to him. He also back during the Obama administration worked with Tom Vilsack in Washington, and I wrote to him. I said, Sam, okay, Sam, are you going to Washington with Tom? Because Tom Vilsack's going to go to Washington too for Ag, Department of Ag. And he wrote back and he said, my plans are to stay here in Wisconsin. And they said, I'm paraphrasing, obviously, and to work to increase the place of the Democrats in Wisconsin. So what he's doing is he's working within the power aspect of Wisconsin, which it needs to be done because that state is a mess. It is a mess. Other than the governor, and the lieutenant governor, that's fine. But that state legislature, as well as the state Supreme Court, is just a mess.
Well, it'll be interesting because, as you know, usually in the off year, in this case 2022, the party that has won the presidency suffers some losses, including after we passed Obamacare, we lost 60 U.S. House seats. Might be different this time around. I think from the day after election in 2016, we have a new kind of organizing model that does not depend on the Democratic National Committee, and I think we've shown that we're not going to go to sleep on off-year elections. I think Wisconsin, in comparison to Michigan and Pennsylvania, in order of biggest mess, it goes Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania. But all three of those states need work, and they're all states where we should do better than we've been doing. And in all three states, of course, we have the governorship, but have problems in the state legislature. And in Wisconsin, we have the awful impact of the Wisconsin Supreme Court, which has made the governor almost powerless on the COVID. We have a question about whether there's going to be a reparations bill. I don't think so. I don't think there's any chance that Congress would formally pass something called reparations for African Americans for our enslavement of them. However, there'll be an agenda that is entirely and that's very focused on the matters of racial justice and economic justice in America. I think you'll see very pointed efforts on economic disparities, especially since when the Republicans passed the tax bill a couple of years ago, they left the personal tax rates to expire in 2025 or so. And it means that they have to be worked on in Biden's presidency, which gives Biden a lot of leverage because they can let those tax rates expire. A lot of these appointments, 4 or 5 of them, are about racial and economic justice, but I don't think it would be under the flag of reparations. We have a Kilbane question here.
Yeah, Tom.
I'm wondering what you think about what will happen with the the really far right, wild Trump followers that show up many places with guns. Do you think there'll be some actual confrontations with firearms, or you think they'll just tamp down?
I think it's amazing that there hasn't been more shooting, given that the fires that he and other commentators have lit, and this thing like Kelly Ward in Arizona saying, "Are you willing to die to fight this?" I think we're on thin ice already, so I would not be at all surprised if somebody gets shot. If an elected official gets shot, but I'm hoping Biden's approach to the whole thing will calm things down quite a bit. And of course, there's the distractions of the COVID. So a lot of that anger on the steel is also the anger over shutdowns of businesses and so forth. So if Biden can get 100 million vaccines out in his first 100 days, that will help a lot. If we can get America back to normal in terms of jobs and the economy, I think that will quell some of the anger.
Yeah, I saw it popped in Town and Country quickly last night, and there was a sign on the door now that says "No open carry." They just put it up yesterday. It's
Really?
like, for real.
Only in America do we have to remind people not to bring their
Oh my God!
handgun into the TNC.
You mean
The
to say?
arguments over the asparagus take on an all new meaning when somebody's carrying.
Well, I do want to tell you one thing. Last weekend or the weekend before, when the cult people and the Trump people were down in front of the Judy and Jay's place. I walked through there because I was walking down anyway. And it was interesting listening to the people. They were very nice. They were not masked. There were about 20 of them. And boy, did they have a spread. Good food. But the thing is, the guy, young fellow, 25 years old, maybe, with a bullhorn saying, "I just want you to know, folks, that this is not this flu that we have now, or the virus we have now is, yes, the China virus." But he said, it was back in 1918 when we had the China flu. Swear to God.
An immense amount of misinformation. My favorite thing is some academic has done research on Sean Hannity followers versus Tucker Carlson followers and Sean Hannity followers are more likely to have contracted the virus because Tucker Carlson is a tiny bit toward the center from Sean Hannity on the virus. So it just shows you the madness that is out there is just incredible. I think we elected the right person. We elected the most empathetic person in America to be our president. I do worry that he's 10 years past his natural time to be president, but I think he's certainly done the right thing so far. I know you're probably running out of steam. It's 12:20. Do we have other questions, thoughts? It sounds like I'm going to be invited back sometime in the future.
David has agreed to be back with us Friday, January 15th.
And, I wonder if Robin is still on. Robin, did you have anything you want to say about all these lawsuits, being a person of the law?
The only one thing I do hold out hope for, and we've seen little snippets demonstrated so far, is that the Supreme Court and some of the other judges who have been appointed by Trump and other Republican presidents, I believe at least those who are experienced, who have basic integrity, are over the long run not necessarily going to be swayed and automatically vote the way Trump wants them to vote, because from what I've read of their background, they are more independent than that, and they do honor the judicial independence. And we'll just see. I may be more hopeful, but I think we're seeing some glimmers of that. And some of the justices on the Supreme Court we have most revered in past years did not start out to be as open-minded as they became later. So I'm hanging in there hoping for integrity to prevail. So let's just say
it's
that.
certainly true of Souter and Stevens. Three of the major rulings on the Trump lawsuits have been the opinion has been written by Trump appointees, all rejecting his claims. So that's a good thing.
Right.
Any other questions or thoughts by anybody?
No. Well, thank you, David. And next month.
I'm looking forward to it, and I'd be happy to see you on my blog, Our Unfinished Work. And thanks so much for caring so much about all these things.
You bet. And I also wanted to let you know, Reed put up here, last night was the first night of Hanukkah, and on Monday, the Bainbridge Island Historic Museum hosts a member of one of Bainbridge Jewish communities, Sharon Retznick, to talk about winter celebrations. So I guess that will be happening on Monday right here. So hopefully you'll all be able to join us. So thank you all for joining the Bainbridge Island Senior Community Center. Something to talk about. We'll see you again. Have a great weekend.
Thank you.